All right, it's the end of the week here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Before we even jump into it, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video, do those two things. It would mean a whole lot to me, and I appreciate everyone who has done it so far. You see that subscribe button is right down there. You click that blue rectangle, and you will subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can turn on notifications so you get alerts sent right to your phone every time we go live, because we put out these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday, to give you kind of, just some Pitt thoughts, some Pitt commentary, some Pitt talking points each day. But we also have our live shows, like last night's live Panther-Lair show, which we did last night because of the Pitt basketball game on Wednesday night. Usually we go live on Wednesday nights at 8:30, but we did it last night due to Pitt having the exhibition game against Edinburgh on Wednesday. And then we'll be live tomorrow night after the Syracuse game to talk about everything we see when Pitt hosts number 20 Syracuse at Acrisure Stadium. 3:30 kickoff for that game. Thinking we'll probably start the post-game show around 10 o'clock or so. I don't want to lock into that time because you never know how games will go. I keep thinking back to the 2018 Pitt-Syracuse game. That one went to overtime. If this one goes to overtime, we could be there a little bit later than expected. But look, if you're worried about missing the live post-game show, you want to make sure you're there for it, click subscribe, turn on notifications, and you'll get an alert sent right to your phone when we go live. You don't have to worry about it. It'll just be easy as that. A little notification. It says, hey, Panther-Lair Show, going live right now. And that way you'll make sure that you don't miss the live conversation. That's always, I really enjoy these Morning Pitt videos, but the live shows are a lot of fun. They really are, because we have that chat screen there, and you can get in the conversation, you can get involved, you can post your comments and your questions like we do on the Panther-Lair show, like we did last night, and like we'll do on the live post-game show. Your thoughts and comments and reactions to Pitt's game against Syracuse, whatever the outcome is. And of course, we're going to have a lot to say today about what that outcome might be. The Orange, number 20 in the initial college football playoff rankings of 2022. They're 6-2 overall so far this season, and 3-1 in the ACC. Their only loss in conference play was 2 games ago, when they hosted Clemson. They ended up losing that game to the Tigers, despite having an 11-point halftime lead last week. Make sure it was last week. It was their last game. Did they play Notre Dame last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? I forget the exact date. Yeah, it was last week. They lost to Notre Dame at the Dome. I'm sorry. They were at Clemson. At Clemson, let me see, 2 weeks ago, right? And then they hosted Notre Dame this past week. Their first two losses of the season. They got into 6-0. And Syracuse was really one of these teams that I think in the early going, we said, okay, let's see when they get to the meat of their schedule. Once they got past Louisville, and it really kind of, you started to see what some of these other teams like Virginia were going to be like. You kind of looked down Syracuse's schedule and said, okay, they're probably going to be 5-0 through their first five. Home against Louisville, at UConn, home against Purdue, Virginia, and Wagner. You thought, well, they're probably going to be 5-0 coming out of those games. But then they have to host NC State. They have to go to Clemson. They have to host Notre Dame. They have to go to Pitt. They have to host Florida State, and they have to go to Wake Forest before closing out the season against Boston College on the road. And so you said, look, they could very well be 5-0 out of those to start the season, and then they could easily lose the next 5 or 6 games, or 5 out of the next 6, or 4 out of the next 6. It would not have been a surprise if they had gone into the finale sitting at 6-5 or 5-6 even, because the schedule was really sort of split in how challenging it was going to get. Once they got that win over Louisville, it really unfolded nicely for them, and that's exactly how it happened. And then when they got to that 6th game, when they took on NC State, who was ranked number 15 in the nation, you thought, okay, this is where they're really going to be challenged. But then Devin Leary didn't play in that game. And so Syracuse gets out with a 24-9 win over the Wolfpack. The Wolfpack drop, of course. They're now like 21-22 or somewhere around there in the college football playoff rankings. Syracuse forces Jack Chambers to complete 18 of 30 for 160 yards. They only give up 95 rushing yards. Meanwhile, it's not like Garrett Schrader lit the world on fire. Garrett Schrader, Syracuse's quarterback, he threw 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Sean Tucker didn't even rush for 100 yards, although between him and Garrett Schrader, they did have 179 rushing yards for Syracuse. But it's not like it was a dominant blowout. What they were really able to do is take advantage of NC State's quarterback situation and pull that win out 24-9. So they got that one. And then the next week, was Clemson. And so their second real test, or what was expected to be their second test, ended up being their first test, and they lost that game 27-21, even though Clemson really didn't play all that well. Will Shipley played well. DJ didn't play all that well, and Syracuse didn't even get that much pressure on him. I think he was pressured on something like 18% of his dropbacks. So it's not even like DJ was under a ton of pressure. I apologize, even though he's been in the ACC for a couple of years now, I still can't manage the pronunciation of DJ, the Clemson quarterback's last name, and I don't want to butcher it. I don't want to be disrespectful, so I'm not going to even try. And then last week they host Notre Dame, and this was a game that was kind of over right from the start. Notre Dame, I think on the first play of the game, had a 29-yard pick six or a 30-yard pick six, whatever it was, and they never really looked back. They won that game 41-24. Notre Dame didn't play great. Drew Pine threw for 116 yards. I think in that game, he was actually under pressure a lot. As we look at how Syracuse is going to attack defensively, and this team's definitely got some strengths on defense. As we look at how Syracuse is going to attack defensively, they pressured Drew Pine, the Notre Dame quarterback. They blitzed him on half of his dropbacks. He dropped back 23 times, and they blitzed 11 times according to Pro Football Focus. They got pressure on him 11 times. He was 3 of 7 against pressure for 1 touchdown. He also threw an interception when he was kept clean. When he wasn't under pressure, he didn't really have a great game. But that pick six really set the tone. And then when it came down to it, Syracuse also had to change quarterbacks at halftime. Garrett Schrader got hurt after throwing an interception and a touchdown in the first half and only 35 yards. He was 5 of 14 for 35 yards with a touchdown and a pick before halftime, and he left the game with an injury. Carlos Del Rio Wilson came in, 11 of 22, a $190, a touchdown and a pick. Not a lot going on the ground for Syracuse in this one. They had 61 rushing yards. 60 of those were Sean Tucker, who carried the ball 16 times. That was sort of a common complaint after the Clemson game. Tucker had 5 carries for like 50 or 60 yards. And so a lot of people said, why isn't he getting the ball more? He's averaging 11 yards a carry in that loss against Clemson. Well, he got the ball 3 times more and ended up with about the same rushing yardage. Tucker didn't do a lot of damage against Pitt last season. Pitt largely held him in check after he had pretty much led the ACC more or less wire to wire in rushing. But Pat Narduzzi said some interesting things yesterday about how Syracuse is using Sean Tucker, the running back for the Orange, about how they're throwing him the ball more. He's making catching more than he has in the past. Just bringing up his receiving stats. He's got 32 receptions so far this season. He had 20 all of last year and actually entered this season with 28 career receptions. So he's already caught more passes this year than he has at any other point in his college career. And so you see him being used that way. And that's going to challenge Pitt's defense. We've seen this defense be susceptible to wheel routes, swing passes, things where you can get the outside linebackers in space and force them to make a play. If it's blocked well, we've seen Pitt's corners get blocked well on screens, swing passes, things like that. There are, I think enough examples that we've seen in the past where Pitt's defense has gotten beaten by pass-catching running backs that I think you get a little concerned because Tucker is a talented back. He's one of the more talented backs in the ACC. He's not the number one back in the conference this year. That guy plays at Pitt, but he's a talented back, and he's going to be a challenge to contain. When I look at Syracuse, I think Garrett Schrader or Carlos Del Rio Wilson, whichever quarterback plays, it seems like it's still a little bit up in the air, and I apologize if an announcement is made since the time we taped this video. Either quarterback, both quarterbacks can run. And Pat Narduzzi has made that point. Both quarterbacks are athletic. They can both get out and move. And so there's a challenge there that they can both throw pretty decent and they can both run. They're going to both test your defense with quarterback draws and scrambles and things like that. And so that's your number one challenge, is to watch out for those guys running. I think they scare you more as runners than they do as passers. I think Sean Tucker as a pass catcher is a concern. This Pitt defense showed some holes in run defense at various points early in the season, but on the whole, I think they've been pretty good. That's kind of a way I would sum up Pitt's defense altogether this season. They've had some holes, they've had some breakdowns, but on the whole, they've been pretty good. You could look at the Louisville game. They only gave up 17 points. And one of those touchdowns had to come, basically was set up by, by a trick play. North Carolina goes off in the fourth quarter and scores 3 touchdowns against Pitt, but they also only give up 3 touchdowns through the first 3 quarters. Generally played pretty well against Carolina. Played as well as anybody has for the most part until the until the dam broke. Things kind of went awry. The defense has been more or less pretty good this season. I think good enough to win most games. I don't know. Aside from the fourth quarter collapse against North Carolina, I think they were good enough to beat Georgia Tech and they were good enough to beat Louisville. And quite frankly, they played Tennessee as well as anybody has played Tennessee this season. Pitt's defense, that is. And so they've been good enough, I think. They do need to watch out for a few of these things that Syracuse can do well. The running quarterback, the pass-catching running back, and then the tight end, Ronnie Gadsden, who is their leading receiver, their number one target. Is he a tight end? Is he just a big receiver? I don't know. It doesn't matter. He's going to be tough to cover. He's going to be a real challenge for the guys who have to cover him, whether it's the outside linebackers or whether it's the safeties, or even if he gets out wide and uses that size advantage against Pitt's corners. And so I think, Syracuse's offenses haven't typically scared me too much when I look at their matchups against Pitt. But this offense does have a couple key guys, a couple key players who can do some specific particular things that could be a real problem for Pitt. I don't think Syracuse is going to put up 42 like North Carolina did. I don't think they've got the talent that Carolina had. I don't think they've got that just overall skill. But between the players that they have and this new offense that they're running that has had success this season, they're averaging more than 30 points per game. There are some concerns to be had there. And this defense has to be really sharp. That's going to be the case in all games. But in this one in particular, I think Pitt's defense really has to be on point because Syracuse's defense is pretty good. Statistically, they have put up some really good numbers. You're talking about the number 2 defense in the ACC in scoring, allowing 18.4 points per game. The number 1 defense in the ACC in yards, 303.1 yards per game. The number 1 pass defense in the conference, giving up 164.5 yards per game. They're number 4 in interceptions with 8. They're number 1 in pass touchdowns allowed, only giving up 6 passing touchdowns through 8 games so far this season. Their only hole, really, and it's not a huge hole, they're number 8 in the ACC in rushing defense. They're allowing 138.6 rushing yards per game. And so even where they're sort of middle of the pack in the conference, they're still they're giving up less than 140 rushing yards per game. It's not a huge it's not a huge vulnerability. And you kind of look through the games that they've had. Notre Dame was the one that really went off, 246 rushing yards as a team, and they split it around. Their running back had 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think you're looking for more than that out of Izzy Abanikanda. He really only managed about that total of yardage against North Carolina, a run defense that is has been far more vulnerable through the season, through this early part of the season than Syracuse has so far. I think if you're looking about how to attack Syracuse, it's the same game plan as always. You need to get Israel Abanikanda going, but you're going to have to find some kind of consistency in the passing game. It was great that they were able to hit those play action deep shots. It was great that they were able to hit the post pattern out of play action to Jared Wayne. That's great. Try and do those things again. But you're going to also have to develop more of that consistent short passing attack, the dink and dunk. How many weeks have I been saying this? How many weeks have I been talking about how, coming out of the bye week, I laid it out. I said, this is what they need to do. And quite frankly, it's what they did against Louisville. On the very first drive, they marched right down the field, basically doing what I laid out and described, save for the part where Keaton Slovis, took an unnecessary shot downfield and underthrew Konate Mumfield and ended up being an interception. I didn't tell him to do that part. But the rest of that drive was more or less what I said they need to do, and it is it continues to be what they need to do. You've got Gavin Bartholomew. You've got running backs who can catch passes. You've got a fullback who can catch passes. And we'll see if Daniel Carter is back available this week after he did not travel to North Carolina. You've got receivers who I think are mostly shorthanded, and Jared Wayne and Kanate Mumfield. You can get these guys the ball. You can scheme them open, and it doesn't have to be 50 yards downfield. It can be 6 yards downfield. It can be 8 yards downfield. Those are good pickups, particularly on first down. If you throw a 7-yard pass on first down, love it. Take that all day, over and over and over again. If you can get 7 yards on first down, you are in business with this rushing attack. Okay, with the way this team can run the ball, 7 yards on first down is a win, a big win. Okay, this is what you need to emphasize. This is where they need to attack, and this is the approach that they need to take. Gavin Bartholomew has to be more involved. I don't know any other way to say it. And I'm the guy who used to always, when people would say, oh, we got to get the ball to Hynoski, or we got to get the ball to J.P. Holtz, I say, okay, yeah, those guys are good, but do you really want to take touches away from your big-time playmakers? Because, with Henry Hynoski in 2009, okay, are you taking touches away from Dion Lewis, from Doran Dickerson, from Jonathan Baldwin to give it to the fullback? I don't think so. But in this case, I think it benefits the whole offense. The more you can use Gavin Bartholomew, first of all, you're going to get good results out of those plays. It's a proven fact. When Gavin Bartholomew gets the ball, good things happen. And so that's the first bonus. That's the first benefit, the first reason you want to try and get the ball to your sophomore tight end. And then the second is because it's going to open up more opportunities for guys like Jared Wayne and Kanate Mumfield. It might open up opportunities in the run game. It'll open up passing opportunities for the running backs. It makes no sense why Gavin Bartholomew doesn't get more usage than he does. He's averaging less than 3 targets per game through 8 games, and that's criminal. That is criminal. It's coaching malpractice to not use your best players, and he is one of their best players in the passing game. And he's got to be used. They've got to get him the ball. Between Bartholomew, Jared Wayne, Kanate Mumfield, and Izzy Abanikanda, they've got 4 legit playmakers. Rodney Hammond, you can throw him into that group as well. They've got 5 legit playmakers who can really make plays for this offense, who can do a lot, who can help you get down the field, either in big chunk plays or chipping away. And I think this offense has the ability to go dink and dunk, to go West Coast offense their way down the field. And I don't know if that's what Frank Cignetti wants to do. It doesn't seem like it is. But I would think his main priority right now is winning. And the way to win is probably to emphasize some of these guys that we're talking about. You're going to be facing one of the better defenses in the ACC, but they're not unbeatable. They have been run on. Teams have had some success passing on them. The more you can run, the more likely you are to open up that success for the passing game. This is a game that Pitt can win. There's any question about it. You can say that about every game this season. This is game 9, and it's the 9th game that Pitt can win. The 9th game that Pitt is good enough to win, but they're not good enough to win on talent alone. They've got to have a good plan, and they've got to execute it. So my keys to the game are play good football. I think that's what it comes down to. This team has shot itself in the foot over and over and over again, costing itself at least 2 wins in Georgia Tech and Louisville. And that's the difference between, being 6-2 or and 4-4. 6-2, which is where they should be, 4-4, which is where they are. But this is a game they have to win. Every game has been a game that they have to win, and certainly this game against Syracuse at home in front of what's likely to be a small crowd is one they need to win. It is kind of a funny the way it lines up with the 2018 game. If you recall, 2018, Pitt came home to host Syracuse after losing a pair of road games, including one at North Carolina. Everyone was really down on the team. Everyone thought they were pretty much done, and they were done. The season was slipping away. Meanwhile, Syracuse comes rolling in. They're ranked, and everybody's talking about how Syracuse is one of the surprise teams in the ACC and playing at a high level, and they've really taken it to the next. They've taken the next step. They're really moving forward as a program, and Pitt ends up beating them. And it started. It was a jump start for the season. It gained some momentum. I don't know if this year's team is going to do that. I don't know if this year's team is. I think they're capable of it, but I don't know if they're going to do it because it does feel like this season is slipping away. We'll see if they're able to turn it around and put the brakes on that, at least for a week, against a ranked Syracuse team. So that game will be happening at Acrisure Stadium. The rest of the ACC will be in action. And actually, there is a scenario this weekend where Carolina could clinch the Coastal. It's possible, and maybe even borderline realistic to look at. I don't know if you would say it's likely, but let's run through it. So the ACC games kick off tonight. Duke is at Boston College. Duke should win that game because Boston College is really struggling. But we'll see what comes out of that. And then tomorrow, the noon game, Carolina at Virginia. If Carolina wins that game, they're going to improve to 8-1 overall, 5-0 in the ACC. If Carolina wins, Pitt and Virginia will be eliminated from contention for the Coastal. Virginia Tech's already out, so that would a Carolina win, regardless of any other results, would eliminate 3 teams right off the bat. Pitt, Virginia. Well, it would eliminate Pitt and Virginia, and like I say, Virginia Tech is already out. Miami's hosting Florida State tomorrow night on ABC, 7:30 game. If Miami loses and Carolina wins, Miami will be out of the Coastal. They'll be eliminated because they're 2-2 right now. They already have a loss to North Carolina. Georgia Tech is at Virginia Tech. That's the 12:30 game tomorrow. If Georgia Tech loses at Virginia Tech and Carolina wins at Virginia, Georgia Tech will also be eliminated. Duke, same thing. If they lose tonight at Boston College, which is unlikely, but you can't rule anything out. If they lose tonight and Carolina wins, they will also be eliminated. So, if North Carolina beats Virginia tomorrow at noon, and you have a Duke loss tonight, a Miami loss tomorrow night, and a Georgia Tech loss tomorrow afternoon, Carolina will clinch the Coastal. Unlikely, probably. I don't think Duke is going to lose at Boston College tonight, but the game is on the road. I don't know about Georgia Tech at Virginia Tech. I mean, I guess somebody has to win that game. Miami absolutely could lose to Florida State tomorrow night. We'll see there. I would say the chances are pretty good that Pitt's going to be eliminated from the Coastal Division race before the game even tips. Well, I don't know if it would be before the game kicks off. Carolina, Virginia is a noon game. Pitt, Syracuse is a 3:30 game. I don't know if Carolina, Virginia will be over by the time Pitt kicks off at 3:33 or whatever time it actually will be. But there's a pretty good chance Pitt will be eliminated from the Coastal Division before too long into their game tomorrow afternoon. I think we've seen that coming. I mean, there were any number of chances to avoid that fate, or at least avoid having that fate come so early. Specifically the Georgia Tech and Louisville games were opportunities to avoid that fate. They should be 3-1 right now, not 1-3 in the ACC. But that's where they're at. And this is the position they've played themselves into. This is where they put themselves in the ACC this season and in the Coastal Division. And they'll be eliminated with a North Carolina win tomorrow. And then it just becomes a matter of playing for bowl eligibility, and then, to some extent, bowl priority and bowl positioning. That's what you're playing for. And quite frankly, that's what you're playing for at this point. Because even if Carolina doesn't win, at Virginia tomorrow, which would be a surprise, I mean, at some point they're going to eliminate Pitt. Pitt and Virginia will be, among the, Virginia Tech has already been eliminated. Pitt and Virginia will probably be the next 2 teams to get eliminated. Sort of regardless of their outcomes. I mean, Carolina will eventually just kind of push those teams out. It'll be interesting to see if this whole scenario falls where, Carolina could clinch it. I mean, like I say, it's unlikely. Or maybe, I don't know if you would necessarily say it's likely, but it's definitely possible. Carolina wins at Virginia, Miami loses, Georgia Tech loses, and Duke loses. Carolina clinches, I think, if my math is right. But this time of year, we always start getting into all these scenarios, and sometimes the math isn't always exactly right. Pitt can win this game. Pitt should win this game. I mean, no disrespect to Syracuse, but I don't think they're there yet. I don't think Garrett Schrader is that good. That's a big. He's not a Drake May type player, but I mean, neither was Jeff Sims, neither was Malik Cunningham. This Syracuse team, they're playing very good defense. Their offense is just okay. despite the improvements that they've made, they've got a few key weapons that you have to be able to stop. And that's what it ultimately comes down to. Can you stop those weapons? Can you keep Sean Tucker from beating you through the air and on the ground? Can you keep Aranda Gadsden from beating you? And can you keep Garrett Schrader or Carlos Del Rio Wilson from beating you out of the pocket? That's what it'll come down to. Pitt's defense is going to have to put up a real stand in this game. And then the offense is going to have to find a little bit of rhythm somehow. Some momentum on offense. And we have not seen them do it pretty much all season for 60 minutes. Do you finally figure it out in Game 9 when you enter the final third of the season? Seems unlikely, but that's why we go to the games. That's why we watch the games. That's why we cover the games. And, of course, we'll have a ton of coverage right there at Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans all day, every day, during the game. In the game thread, you can talk with other Pitt fans about what you're seeing. And then after the game is over, probably around 10 o'clock or so tomorrow night, we will be live right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com for the Panther-Lair postgame show. So you can tune in and talk about everything you saw. And we'll use the chat screen so you can post your comments on the game, your questions about the game, and your reactions. And we'll read it on the air and during the live show, and we'll go back and forth and have a conversation about it. I look forward to those, win or lose. Those are always fun and entertaining and interesting. So I hope you can tune in and join us tomorrow night. Thanks for checking out another week of the Morning Pitt. It's been a lot of fun. If you didn't see it yesterday, we had a basketball episode of the Morning Pitt. We talked all hoops. What did we learn from the exhibition games? Because the regular season opener is coming on Monday night. So check that one out right there on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like this video. We appreciate it very much. Hope you had a great week. Hope you're lining up for a great weekend. It looks like beautiful weather. So I hope this weekend is good for you. We will talk to you tomorrow night for the live Panther-Lair postgame show. And then we'll be back with another Morning Pitt Monday morning right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.